Hello and welcome to another episode of Baughcuts. In today's episode, we're looking at the poem Kamikaze by Beatrice Garland. And as always, these episodes follow the same structure, the structure that we ourselves need to employ in our English Literature Paper 2 exam. We're having a look at the poem's title, so we're going to engage in some detailed analysis of the title of the poem, in this case, Kamikaze. And then we're going to look at three key quotations from the beginning, the middle, and the end of the poem, tracking them across the course of the text, and obviously unpicking them at the word level. So let's start with that title. The title, of course, Kamikaze. It's a very important entry point to the poem because what it does is it encapsulates ideas around duty, identity, and the human cost of war. Now, it's derived from the Japanese term meaning divine wind, but during World War II, it was a term used very specifically to describe Japanese suicide pilots who conducted deliberate suicide crash attacks. They blew themselves up to attack and destroy mostly American aircraft carriers. It's a word that embodies that idea of sacrificing oneself, the kind of ultimate sacrifice for the nation. So it is a term that is laden with nationalistic fervor and the valorization of self-sacrifice. In the context of the poem, what it does is it situates us as readers within the rigid expectations of wartime Japan, where honor and duty were paramount, they were essential. Pilots were expected to embrace death willingly, wholeheartedly, and deviation from this path was perceived as a profound dishonor, not only to the individual refusing to obviously engage in this suicidal self-sacrifice, but also a profound dishonor to their family and indeed their community. Now, Garland's use of the term sets up, use of the word kamikaze as a title, sets up a very poignant irony. While the term denotes on its own noble, selfless self-sacrifice and death, the poem, of course, narrates a story of a pilot who, moved by the beauty of the natural world and memories of his family, chooses to return home. This act, intended to preserve his life, results in his social death. He's then shunned, as we know, by his family and community. He's treated as though he no longer exists. So the title underscores the central theme of the poem, the conflict between societal expectations and personal conscience. It's also a title that prompts reflection on the nature of identity, a very key theme within the power and conflict cluster. The pilot is torn between the role of soldier, bound by duty, and his identity as a father and an individual with desires and memories. So his decision to return challenges that, what we might call a monolithic identity, being socially imposed upon him, suggesting that we need a more nuanced understanding of heroism and legacy, certainly a more nuanced understanding of heroism and legacy that is encapsulated merely by the term kamikaze. So, in short, then, the title captures that exploration of duty, honor, but also personal choice. And it challenges us as readers to consider the true cost, in many ways, of societal expectations and also the courage it takes to defy them in favor of life and what we might term personal integrity. Now, we turn to the poem itself, and as I say, we're going to track three quotations from across the poem. We're going to begin with the opening. Her father embarked at sunrise. The poem begins, rather surprisingly, bearing in mind the title, with a calm, almost rather gentle image that belies the gravity of the situation. Her father immediately situates the narrative as being told by, or looking at things from the perspective of the daughter, although initially it is, of course, in third person. What it does is it indicates that we're going to be looking at family memory and family narratives, family stories. Embarked at sunrise has a dual significance. Literally, the kamikaze pilot, the father, sets off on his mission at dawn, and symbolically, the sunrise evokes the flag of Japan, often called the land of the rising sun, but also that idea of new beginnings. The irony, of course, is that this journey is meant to be one with no return, a one-way journey into history, as the poem says a couple of lines later. The gentle imagery of sunrise suggests hope or beauty, which then is radically undercut with the expectation, of course, of a suicide mission. It sets up important themes. Duty and honour. Of course, the father is, at least to begin with, following orders to embark on this kamikaze mission, but also gets us to think about family and memory, and the conflicts between personal feelings and patriotic expectation. The simplicity of the statement belies the powerful conflict within the pilot. He leaves at sunrise, presumably filled with some nationalistic fervour or a kind of resignation to the situation he's found himself in. But also, sunrise, of course, hints at life and the natural beauty that does later change his mind. The image of departure at dawn situates us in a very Japanese context, without explicitly stating it, and it underscores how authority and propaganda send off young men in a ceremonially beautiful setting for something actually horrifying and brutal. It's a quotation, then, that introduces the narrative of the poem calmly, foreshadowing the contrast between the natural world's allure and the soldier's mission that's going to become central to the poem's overall message. And then the next quotation, taken from later on in the poem, the little fishing boats strung out like bunting on a green-blue translucent sea. This is a rich visual quotation that captures the pilot's pivotal moment of epiphany, as we might term it. The kamikaze pilot flies, he looks down, and he sees little fishing boats below him. The simile, strung out like bunting, compares these boats to decorations, like the colourful flags one might see at a celebration. Bunting is normally associated with joy and community and life, a rather stark contrast to the kamikaze mission of death. The sea is green-blue translucent, emphasizing its clarity, its beauty. Though this translucent water, through it, he can see the world vibrant and alive. It's idyllic imagery, and it stands in opposition to the grim task he's meant to perform. The pilot's perspective on this scene is key. It symbolizes the pull of life and the pull of memory. The fishing boats suggest a traditional, everyday livelihood, perhaps reminding him of his own childhood fishing trips and the simple joys of home. The fact they're little and strung out implies delicacy and an ordering by nature or fate, as if presenting him with some kind of path back to life. The moment encapsulates the internal conflict of the poem, the law of the natural world, the law of family and normal life versus the expectations of martyrdom for one's country. All those celebratory connotations of bunting are deeply ironic. The only celebration in a kamikaze mission is meant to be posthumous, post-death honour. But here, nature itself seems to be celebrating life, and it's obviously subtly persuading him to turn back. The quotation hits on nature's influence, the power of memory, the power of heritage. The pilot is recalling the beauty of his home, symbolized by the sea and boats. It's also a turning point. Confronted with such beauty, exposed again to such beauty, the pilot's sense of duty is overwhelmed by a realization of what he'd lose, the everyday wonders of life. This is the moment that leads to the central act of defiance in the poem, the pilot aborting his mission. Thus, it's crucial for understanding Garland's message about the value of life over abstract notions of honour and duty. And we turn to the final line of Kamikaze, quote, "He must have wondered which had been the better way to die." It's poignant and it's ironic. After recounting how the pilot returned home and was shunned by his family and community, treated as though he were dead, the narrator, the speaker, the kind of daughter speaker, concludes with this devastating observation. He must have wondered shows a degree of empathy, imagining the father questioning in hindsight. Which had been the better way to die suggests that in the end, either choice leads to a form of death. It's inevitable. Had he completed the suicide mission, he would have died physically with honor, according to his culture's, the Japanese wartime code. By turning back, he preserved his life, his physical life, but suffers a sort of social death. His family treat him as though he no longer existed, and he lived in disgrace and isolation. So the word better is painfully, poignantly ironic. It implies that neither option was good. One is literal death, the other a social, symbolic living death. He's left to weigh the value of each. The line underscores those themes: honor versus humanity, and also that theme of societal pressure. The power of cultural expectations, those incantations, the head full of incantations from the beginning of the poem, is so great that choosing life results in the loss of life's meaning. It's a phrase that resonates with those themes of regret and internal conflict. The idea of the father living with guilt or some kind of turmoil, questioning if his moment of choosing life was actually worth the lifelong consequences. Structurally and tonally, ending on this line with no further comment leaves the reader with a stark sense of tragedy and ambiguity. Garland doesn't tell us the answer. The point is, the conflict itself is unresolved. The use of must have shows, too, that the daughter is wondering and empathizing, even though as a child she followed that communal ostracism. Thematically, the final quote drives home the poem's critique of extreme notions of patriotism and honor. It questions a society that creates such a lose-lose situation for an individual. The authority, both military authority and societal authority, effectively destroyed the man either way. Better way to die is a bitter conclusion, emphasizing how conflict can pervert values, distort and skew values to the point that choosing life becomes a source of shame. It leaves us as readers reflecting on the immense personal costs of war, both for the individual and at a broader family level and a communal level, and the complex interplay between personal conscience and duty.